This episode of the Edify Studios podcast is brought to you by Americlad Quality Metal Crafts. Quality Metal Crafts has distinguished themselves as a premier metal fabricator for the architectural construction and industrial markets. From day one, their commitment has been simple: produce the highest quality products at the best possible value with exceptional client service. Attention to detail, superior quality, innovation. That's what makes the Americlad product line the first choice for your construction requirements. To learn more, visit americlad.com.
Welcome to the Edify Studios podcast, discussing the shift of architectural concepts into actual solutions, disrupting the current status quo, and having a blast the whole time. Here are your hosts, Brad Glauser and Brad Walker.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Edify Studios podcast. We are super excited today to bring a special guest from Studio 216, Mr. Jamie Fleming, to the show. Walker?
Yeah.
Check this guy out, huh?
There he is. I thought it was all a joke. We had emailed and said, hey, we're a couple of dummies and we want to do this thing. And he's like, oh, man.
I know, it was.
And I was like,
great.
He's probably lying. That's probably not real. I probably emailed the wrong guy.
Yeah. Wait a minute, is this his assistant? Did he actually, or is this like
just some spammer? No, it was real. It was real and it was legit. And he not only responded, but he's here.
Yeah, he's here. How you doing, Jamie?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Welcome, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Guys, this is incredible.
It's kind of fun.
It is incredible.
It is incredible.
Gosh, we're so good and incredible and awesome.
No, so what we like to do kind of at the beginning of the show is just kind of just check in, see how everybody's been doing. It's been a little bit of a wild wave of a month. We just got over 4th of July.
Yeah.
And that was a good time, right?
It was a good time. 4th of July was an incredible time. I had the good fortune of being invited over to the Mr. Glauser's neighborhood.
Yes.
Which is literally one of those blocks, that cul-de-sac that you see in movies. You know, the one that you're like, that can't be a real place. Everybody's happy and they're smiling and they're like involved with each other in a positive way. And I was like, this is weird. This is like a robotic. What's happening here? Are they going to try to sell me like timeshares, or is that what this is? Is this a setup? And it wasn't. It wasn't. It was legit. And they had one central house to a certain degree.
Right.
And everybody wheeled like 4 or 5 barbecues from every house down there. There were giant speakers and the music was blazing and the kids are just
picnic
running.
Tables with potluck food everywhere.
They've got the whole thing shut down. It was incredible. It was an incredible time. Friends, family, strangers, everybody there just having an incredibly good time.
Yeah, so we live right outside like the no-go, yes-go fireworks zone, right? So we actually can do fireworks at our place, which is pretty rad. So like a few years ago, we just kind of said, yeah, let's all get together for a block party. We don't want to go anywhere on 4th of July. It just takes forever to get back. So, and when you go somewhere, it's just like the kids are dead at the end of the night or whatever it was. And so we just said, let's just do our own party here. So it just kind of grew and grew.
Yeah,
so,
well, you spend like, 3 hours to get somewhere.
Correct.
For 40 minutes.
Right.
And then another 2 or 3 hours just to get the heck out of there. So
walking with blankets and blah, blah, blah. So
everyone left with their digits, all digits.
I think so.
There was a couple.
There was that one guy who kind of hobbled off a little bit. I think he was hiding
skips.
Something.
Yeah.
A couple of skips, maybe a couple of little
eyebrows.
Yeah, little thumb burns or something here and there,
It was funny during it. Like a couple of the moms come up to me like, I think we better reel it in a little bit. It's getting a little dicey. It's
questionable. The last couple.
Dicey. All right, I will.
And then you're on track. You're right on track.
That's when we're right in the sweet spot, right in the eye of the storm, as they say.
No, absolutely. So, no, it's been a good month, man. It's been we're excited to kind of be back in Seattle. I'm back from AIA, kind of doing podcast here. Check in for me, man. I mean, I don't know. I just kind of been getting through like the end of the month holiday. Just got done. My sister just had a baby. Went to go on a visit her.
Oh, that's right.
And just kind of see the family. So I'm originally from Southwest Utah, and we went down to kind of visit the family a little bit, see how they're doing. And my wife's parents, ironically, retired in the same city that I grew up in. So it was kind of like this. So now we have split families there. So every time we go, we kind of feel like 50% over here, 50% over here, and then we ended up running ourselves ragged, not necessarily having vacation. So
just ping ponging.
Yeah, just ping ponging.
But
it's good. We so Southwest Utah, higher elevation, and lots of just more of a high desert area. So there's some sand dunes. We got to kind of go kick back in and just some side by sides, 4-wheel, just go through it and stuff.
So
it was a good time.
So jealous.
So
he's sending pictures of like himself, and he's got this big like scarf over his face. It's got this incredible
skull,
this like skull mouth on it, and he's just so jealous.
You should show some of this on the YouTube. When you
I won't.
No, you have to.
Nothing is going to be on the screen right now. It's going to be just blank on the screen. No visuals.
It's because you're absolutely jealous. I get it.
So jealous.
So no, I mean that's where it's been going. It's been good to come back and kind of get into the flow again and just kick the next round series of podcasts off and get back to some projects.
Yeah.
What about you, B? How you been?
It's been incredible. The kids are out of school, which is always like a tough one for me because it's like I want to spend time with them, and then I do, and then I'm like, I should get back to work. I love my kids, but sometimes it's just like, oh, come on.
Exhausting.
It's exhausting. It's so much work because it's summer, so like I want to go even further and do even more.
And there's more daylight outside.
There's more daylight. There's just more. Right? There's more real estate in the day to a certain degree, and there's no we got to get home in time for bedtime, and we got to do this and go to school tomorrow, and it's a Sunday. No, there's just go, and then I'm just like exhausted. I'm like, I got to get to work, man. I'm done. I'm cooked.
How old are your kids?
Our kids are. My oldest is 12 and my youngest is 9. Both boys.
Perfect.
Both boys. So 9 and 12, wildly aggressive when it comes to just go grind, hustle, which is awesome for us, but it can get you really tired the next day, which is a good thing. It's all for the good. So I've been having that sort of turmoil with that and loving it.
Well, and there's a couple things that, from a check-in standpoint, I think you better kind of reveal. The new deck is in.
Yes. All right. So we've lived in our current home. We live in Woodinville, and we've lived there for the past 12 plus years. And it has had less than a postage stamp size deck on the back. And we have a pretty substantial yard. Our yard is pretty good size, and it's just been a travesty and a train wreck. And it's just been that thing that we just didn't ever get to. We did this, and we did this, and we did this. We've always done stuff, but we just didn't quite get to the deck. This year we did increase the size of it, and it's just been magical.
Yeah.
And watching the kids be part of the whole process, because each day there'd be a little bit more done. There's just these posts in the beginning. It looks like there's an old dock there or something, and then they start to put it every day. My kids would be out there, even if it was just on like a plywood false floor, like just to be out there, because you could never be out there before.
Yeah.
So I just snap pictures the whole time, and now it's done, and it's just unbelievable. Just to have the barbecue out there, because my deck was literally so small. It was basically just a way to get outside. You get on the deck and then you go right down the stairs.
Service stairs, basically.
Exactly. And then I go. So my barbecue was never in a comfortable proximity. So you'd go out and you'd have to like get a wagon of all the stuff you needed to go barbecue, and it'd just be a chore.
And an assembly line to actually get out to the barbecue and
then
grill
to get
something.
It back and everything. So when we did our first barbecue like 2 weekends ago, just as a family, it was this weird feeling of like, I don't have to carry everything.
I can leave the salt right there.
And I can just come right back in.
Yeah.
Super silly, but it was so romantically awesome. So it was very good. Having that piece to the outdoor world was just so worth it.
That's good.
So incredibly worth it.
That sounds great.
What about you, my man? Jimmy, any good check-ins? How's things going? How's your fourth? I mean,
super. We I was out for 3 weeks. I had some work in London with Microsoft, and then flew to Paris and met my wife and 2 boys. And then we spent 12 days and hiked 110 miles around the Mont Blanc range. And started in France, and then we hiked into Italy, and then Switzerland.
So you want to rewind and say, how many miles was that again?
Yeah, it was 110 miles. We did more
110
vertical ascent and descent than Mount Everest. So it was incredible.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, it kicked my butt. I am by far in terms of the 4 family members, I'm the least. I let's put it this way: I spend more time behind a desk than the other 3.
I see.
that first hike that we did the first day, I mean, I thought I can't do this for 11 more days. But it got easier, even though the hike actually got more difficult. I think acclimated, and
sure,
scenery is unbelievable.
I can't even imagine.
I think it's the only kind of extended hike that you'll ever do where you actually gain weight, because you're stopping in little villages and there's fresh baked bread and cheese and pastas.
How romantic is that?
Croissants and
okay.
So
okay, I'll sign up.
Put it on your list. Put it on your list.
That sounds incredible. So
bucket list.
Bucket list out of Mount Blanc region. Is that what you said?
Mont Blanc. Yep.
Mont Blanc.
So we started in Les Houches, which is a little French village just south of kind of the big peak of Mont Blanc.
Okay.
And
where in relation is that in France exactly? Like, I'm a location-oriented geography guy.
It's in the north-southern region.
In the north, this is going to be kind of, I believe, northeast France, because you start in France and then you hike north up into Italy, and then you continue north into Switzerland, and then you drop east and back into France and come back south.
So it's all in the Alps, and you're just...
It's all in the Alps. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, it's unbelievable. And we were early in the season, so there wasn't a ton of other hikers.
Was there a lot of snow and stuff like that?
Parts were in snow where we were trekking. But, they had, I don't know if you've been reading, Europe had this incredible heat wave.
Oh,
and so we were hiking. Usually I think it would be in like the 60s maybe. It was in the 90s.
Oh, my gosh.
And so hiking up these steep ascents in 90-degree weather.
The worst.
Was
the worst.
You had to carry a lot of water.
Oh. I would need like a llama.
Yeah.
Just for the water.
You need a camel to trail behind you to nurse off of.
Something.
Wow. That was 3 weeks?
The hike was 12 days.
Okay, 12 days.
Yeah, and I was out about 3 weeks total.
Some guys do a 12-day cruise. This guy did 110 miles in 12 days.
But man, the vision that you get to look out, just the viewpoints that you must see every day.
Yeah.
Because that is some of the most unbelievable space.
Yeah. No,
just majestic,
incredible.
Right? It's got to be.
What's cool about it is if you're a goal-oriented person, you can see yourself in relation to Mont Blanc is kind of a reference point. So as you're hiking, you can actually see like, holy crap, we were there 4 days ago. We were all the way down at the other end of that thing. So yeah, it was great. And my 16-year-old son would rather be at home or hanging out with his friends.
Sure.
And I think he surprised himself. He had more fun than he thought. And he was by far always the one out in the lead. We were trying to keep up with him. He was like trotting up the side of the mountain as I was crawling on my hands and knees trying to keep up.
That's great.
So, yeah.
He was just leading the pack.
Like that sounds tremendous.
Like a family Sherpa.
Exactly.
The Tenzing Norgay of the trip.
I would sneak other articles into his backpack to try to laden him with a little more weight to free up my own backpack.
Just little bits of iron and rock.
That sounds awesome, actually.
No big deal.
Well, my 12-year-old likes to collect things, and so he was constantly picking up rocks, saying, I want to take this one home. I was like, Ben, are you kidding me? We're not carrying rocks for 110 miles.
Just the travesty of like, I have to actually lug this around, like for a dad. Like, I get it. So I get it.
My 9-year-old is the vacation hordeman. He's the I need this rock from this one place, and it's never a pebble. It's
right.
For him, it's always like a pretty good size, and they're always pretty good looking rocks. But I'm just like, no.
Right.
Yeah. So my 13-year-old he's the same thing of like, okay, this is a cool shell. I'm like, dude, we're in Mukilteo on a beach, buddy. We can actually come here anytime. Okay.
Right.
Just leave it here.
That stays
there.
Like,
no.
That stays there.
Anyway,
right.
Sorry.
Incredible. Well, what we'd like to do is we would like to go in the Wayback Machine. We'd like to start this thing as far back as you'll let us go.
Okay. All right. To the birth canal.
To the birth canal. To just before that. Now let's go a little forward to that. And correct me if I'm wrong. You grew up not far from where we are existing now, but in a much larger state, Billings, in the state of Montana.
Yeah. So I was actually born in Lander, Wyoming, and I
even bigger sky country.
Yeah, even bigger sky.
So I lived in Lander until I moved my sophomore year of high school to Billings, and then I finished my high school there, and then
so the land of antelope.
Yes, yeah. So I
to the land of elk.
Probably all your sponsors will flee after I say this, but I'm not a big fan of trees, and so I'm always telling people, why can't we cut down some of these trees here? And I know I'm living in the wrong state for a person who doesn't love
this
trees.
This episode brought to you by Dunder Mifflin Paper Company.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm always, I think I'm always, all my neighbors are distraught because I'm always saying, why can't we just cut down all these trees so we can see something? No, but I do like these, big vistas, and I like to be able to see the horizon for orientation. Sometimes it's a little suffocating here.
Yeah, no, same with me. I felt the same way. Like when I moved here 10 years ago, it was just like this, I felt like this 4 walls of trees and then this like ceiling of clouds that existed on me. So I grew up in Southwest Utah where it's just high desert,
sunshine,
you can see forever, and the stars every single night, and that's what it was where I got to know where Orion is, and the southern sky would rotate around and get it. Like, that's just what I grew up with. Right. And then to move here, it's like, come here, it's like, you get to see the stars. I literally, the other night, go out on my back patio, and I was like, just going to have a beer, just kind of relax for a little bit, and then all of a sudden I look up, I'm like, oh, the stars are. I'm not turning that patio light on. I'm sitting here on my on my exterior patio, just gonna enjoy for a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's those rare nights in Washington, that's for sure.
Right.
It is random. I met a guy from Bozeman, Montana.
Oh, yeah.
Like 2 or 3 years ago.
We're probably related.
That's the same. Yeah, same last name. But he was saying something very similar. And I think that's actually interesting. He said, we've basically got the same number of trees where I come from. They're just not in the effing way. Right. Because he goes, we keep them, consistently in a flatter orientation.
Right.
So the trees are great. I don't mind the trees. It's just these stupid hillsides and these rolling that's all. It's like they're screwing everything up. I can only see this way 4 feet and that way 8 feet.
That's true.
Same number of trees. They're just not in the effing way.
That's pretty funny.
That's pretty great. So Billings, you're finishing up high school.
Yep.
Having an incredible time, as we all did and probably did in high school. Except for Glauser, who actually legitimately loved high school.
I did. I was the only individual that probably did loved it as much. I just got done with my 20-year reunion.
Oh,
that's where I also was there. And so I actually organized the thing.
Oh,
so
he's one of those guys.
Hardcore. It takes a village.
It takes a village.
Absolutely.
He is a village of one.
Yeah, village of one.
So in Billings, from Billings, you decide after high school which direction you're going to go?
So from Billings, I have 2 older sisters.
Okay.
And my oldest sister went to university at Wake Forest University. And, she didn't love it. And she thought, this culture is just it's very different, obviously, than growing up in the West to be in the Southeast culture. And so I said, "Oh, you don't like it? You're struggling? Why don't I try that? Maybe I'll take a shot at that." So I
anything you can do, I can do better.
Yeah, exactly. So I also ended up going to Wake Forest University in North Carolina and studied business.
Okay.
And that's where I met my current spouse.
Is she
hopefully
from
current and only?
She's from there. Well, I don't know when we're going to air this episode, but hopefully current.
Right. Hopefully, we'll see.
I don't know.
We'll see when we get to the end of this conversation. We'll see if we're still have something there. She's native from Atlanta, and so horrified her parents because she said, "How did you choose the only? There was only one person there from Montana or Wyoming. Like how?
Yeah.
Why did you marry that guy?" So they weren't super happy that we relocated on the West Coast because her whole family is in Atlanta still to this day. So I think she's made peace with it, but it took a while.
Atlanta is kind of that homegrown city where the people just kind of stay there too, right? I mean,
it seems like it.
A lot of
well, they moved to Stone Mountain,
or
Marietta,
or depending on the laser show.
Right.
There it is,
exactly.
For sure. So Wake Forest, you meet a lady.
Yep. So we actually met in Venice, Italy. We were both studying abroad in Venice, and a great place to, if you can't fall in love with someone in Venice, then you start over again. Something's off. Something's not going to work there. So no, we
sounds incredible.
Started dating in Venice, and then she went to seminary at Princeton, and so we got married a couple years out of college. We both lived and studied lived in the Czech Republic after graduating from university.
Okay.
And it was right after the Velvet Revolution, and
it was
Prague. We lived in Prague, and it was a great time to be there because you could eat for like 75 cents. And
Sure.
You could spend. People would come and get you at the train station. You could sleep on their couch for a couple bucks a night. So we ended up, we weren't married at that time, but we went over with a group and we all lived in the Czech Republic. She taught English and I did a variety of jobs kind of exploring.
Just a nomad type of experience.
Nomad kind of experience of seeing. I was really interested, having just gotten a business degree of, what kind of business can I do here? And so ended up cobbling together a bunch of different things to live there. And so we ended up... that eventually took us to Princeton, New Jersey, where Nicole went to graduate school. And then when she graduated, we moved to Seattle so I could go to University of Washington to study architecture.
So no schooling between the two of you at all. Just street smarts, and that's it.
No, that didn't drive any of their relationship.
We went and so far you've just basically globetrotted to learn at these amazing institutions.
Yeah.
And some of the most incredible ways. That's fascinating to understand that you're and so clearly in some way supporting each other in those elements.
Yeah.
And so now you're in Seattle, you're University of Washington for architecture.
Right. So I got a master's of architecture. I had the
So what decided you to go into architecture from business? Like that's
good.
It's kind of an interesting, I guess, bridge that you have to build there in order to get that. But I'm curious.
It's a left turn. It's a left turn.
It is a left turn. I think. Let's see if I can thread some points together here.
Enlighten.
So, I was very interested in the arts when I was at university. But being a business major, there were so many requirements that you had to take in school that it didn't leave a lot of other
removed you from participating there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I did have these outlets. I got the opportunity to study in Venice, and we had
I was just going to say, there's so much of the art and history and culture that you're going to receive between Venice and Prague. And,
yeah, exactly.
Right?
We had this incredible fortune of having a psychology professor take us over as the proctor to Venice, and she really believed in, she was very interested in cross-cultural psychology, and so she set up our whole curriculum where we would have 3-day weekends every weekend. And so we basically spent the entire semester traveling all over Europe with these 3-day weekends, which is something, when else in your life are you ever,
mackerel.
Have part
and
of
how
that as your
long were you
education?
there?
Hopefully soon for me.
Yeah, hopefully soon.
We were there, I guess we were there about 4.5 months or so.
That's a good amount of time.
Like a full semester of schooling. And I think that's where I kind of got bitten, with this travel bug, and just realized, like, oh my gosh, you can be in Paris one weekend, and then you can be in Denmark the next
Just take
weekend,
the overnight
Greece the
train,
next
right?
weekend. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
But your question, I think, was how did I jump from business to architecture? I think it was rooted in, I've always loved to build and construct things. So I've always been involved. My dad had a wood shop growing up, and we lived on a little farm in Lander, Wyoming, and had a barn with a wood shop. And so I was either playing in my sandbox or I was in the
just an application with your hands and working in that direction.
And
awesome.
As I mentioned earlier about hiking Mont Blanc, I think I being a pretty goal-oriented person, it's always been satisfying to have a vision and then see the completion of and fruition of that vision. And so building was a great kind of manifestation of that. If you could start with an idea, you could sketch some things out, you could try it, you build it, and you have something that you can look at and play with in your hands, and decide if you like it or not, or do it again.
Right.
So So I was always kind of enamored of building, and I had an opportunity. I mentioned when after living in the Czech Republic, my parents had, my dad is a physician and had a kind of a unique schedule where he would work intensely for 10 days on and then take 10 days off. And so he was on this constant rotation of working 10 days and 10 days off. And he got this notion, he's always kind of had wild hobbies and passions, and he got interested in farming and bought a sheep farm in Wyoming and raised 1,000 sheep on over 12,000 acres.
Wow.
And this
just a little farm. You started with a little farm earlier.
I guess my question would be: I'm not a sheep farmer.
Yep.
Nor do I play one on TV. Is 1,000 small? Is it mid-range? Is
12.
Is
it 1,000 or
1,000 sheep?
It's a band. I call it a band of sheep. I mean, there are certainly operations that have tens of thousands of sheep, but that's a fairly sizable sheep operation for Montana, Wyoming, for the U.S. Because these ewes are 1,000 ewes, and then they have you're hoping they'll twin, and so you suddenly have 3,000 sheep where you started with 1,000, you now have 3,000 that you're raising.
Just like that.
But as
wow.
part of that, there were lots of opportunities to build things on this ranch.
Oh, sure.
And
Outfit everything, the fencing.
And I ended up building a log cabin as a place to live when I was living there on the ranch after coming back from graduating from college. When everybody goes through that period of, what do I do after I've graduated? Sure. I had the opportunity to build a log cabin, and that led to another opportunity when Nicole and I were engaged. I moved to North Carolina and got a job with an architect. His name was Tony Eck, and ran the firm Lord Eck and Sargent. Tony had a neat piece of property up in Highlands, North Carolina, and I somehow convinced him, talking about fake it till you make it, I somehow convinced him, said, hey, you want to build this timber frame pavilion, look at this log cabin I just built. Why, I'll build this thing for you. And he said,
in North Carolina.
In North Carolina. He said, yeah, okay, that sounds good. So I recruited one of my really good friends, Chris Wolf, who was studying public health there. And we went and lived up in Highlands, North Carolina, and built this timber frame pavilion. Not having really ever built anything other than a log cabin before, and figuring out how timber frame works, and there's a lot of really beautiful timber frame happening in that area of the world. So I got some more exposure to actually building real structures and objects, and going through the day to day of how are we going to raise this roof beam up here that weighs 1,000 pounds,
the rigging and the
how are we
pulley
going to rig
methods,
this up,
and
so it was fun to kind of figure out some of these ideas, and doing reading of how was this done in the past, and we were just kind of out there in the wild without really any utilities putting together this timber frame pavilion. So super fun. So when I got married and we were living in Princeton, I had the good fortune of getting a job working for Michael Graves, who was teaching at Princeton. And he needed, I didn't have any architecture training other than I'd done this building before.
Okay.
And he had an opening in his model shop to build models. And he had just gotten this contract with Target to create this whole line of products. I don't know if you remember the toaster and all these different things at Michael Graves, the tea kettles and different things. So he needed all of these things modeled. And there was the guy that ran his model shop. His name was Don Menke. Kind of took me under his wing and helped me learn kind of on an industrial level how you turn these industrial designs into physical objects. And so we were working with Wren shape and open and dense foam, and doing all different kinds of things on lathes and sculpting and building all these different objects. So it was super, super fun. I got exposed to both the architecture side in the context of working in an architecture firm, but also got exposed to all this industrial design at the same time.
Wow.
So that was a great job and kind of sustained me, put food on the table while my wife was in graduate school. And through this whole thing, I was just kind of a little bit searching, what do I want to do for a career? What am I going to do? And I thought, well, architecture seems to be an interesting way that I could stay involved in the building side of things, but then, also get to enjoy the design. And I loved this whole, I really liked the idea of that potentially this is how I could thread all these things together. So
that's incredible.
I ended up applying to a bunch of different graduate schools, and we were actually on the road to go to SciArc in Los Angeles, and then I changed my mind at the last minute, and I ended up choosing UW for graduate school. And then we ended up staying out here after.
The die was cast.
Yeah, the die was cast.
Right? The die was cast.
But already at that point, you were creating artificial reality.
Yeah, that's true. That's true because we were making like a
100%
simulation.
You guys were making.
Wait a minute, are you talking
right.
about the timber thing that he built in North
No,
Carolina?
No, like the tea kettles. All
I hope not. I hope not. The guy comes out and it's like 1/8 scale model.
All right,
Here it is.
1/8 scale.
Ta-da! No. But
Right.
at that point, at that building the models and creating those sort of faked out versions of it. That's an artificial reality of here's what it's going to look like in concept.
Yeah, no, that's
So you were concept modeling.
Hadn't thought about that. But
Way
you're
ahead
right.
of it.
No, you're 2 steps deeper into my psyche than I was realizing.
That's the point. Yeah. Let's go.
Welcome to Edify Studios.
Right.
Welcome back. So that is, I mean, so you're seeing the creativity side of it. You're seeing the artificial pieces of it, and a lot of architecture is that having the vision. So you're seeing pictures in your head, and then you push it onto paper and you push it out.
Right.
I think what Glauser got caught on in the beginning was the way we see a lot of the architects that we've talked to come about it is not business school first.
Right. Yeah.
That's
It's
a
design,
different element.
architecture, and then,
Yeah,
Or
and
it's-
then
they're
you're
like, oh, I got to actually have a business
Right.
here and make money to this thing. You know,
And most of them don't admit it till later, but they're like, I just want to figure out how to get paid to draw things.
right.
So they're like, I need to figure out business school after I figure out this piece because I
Right.
just want to get paid for my drawings.
Yeah. Right.
So now you're back in Seattle. You're UW. You're in architecture. You're finishing up your schooling for architecture here at UW.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple other fortuitous or maybe not fortuitous things happened to me. My
Those are the
first
best stories.
year after graduate school, all my cohorts went out and got jobs in architecture offices. And I think I was struggling a bit of just,
like
trying to
converting.
understand, like, is this exactly what I want to be
the
doing?
conversion
Is this the right,
process,
am I in the
right?
right place?
Yeah.
Am I doing the
Yeah.
right thing? And so, as I had mentioned, I've always been super interested in living overseas and traveling overseas and traveling. And I'll thread this piece in, and it'll make
Please.
more sense
Yeah,
in a second.
absolutely.
But I was going around looking at different job openings after that first year of graduate school, and I saw that there were some openings to in some a furniture design place in Soto in Seattle. So I went in and I talked to this guy.
So this wood shop thing couldn't get out of you. could it?
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I went in and I said, hey, listen, I'm in graduate school. I've got some experience designing and building things. Do you need anybody to design furniture for you? And he said, well, actually it might be something that I'd be interested in, but we're kind of have a unique situation here. We have a factory in Vietnam where we manufacture all of our furniture. Here, we're just kind of a warehouse and distribution and retail
Location.
center. And he said, it's interesting. I am looking for a designer, but, I really need somebody in Vietnam. And I said, well, hey, I've got, 3.5 months open before school starts again. I'd be happy to go to Vietnam and design furniture. And he said, all right, let's try that. So he ended up flying me to Ho Chi Minh, and I had the opportunity to work right in the factory designing furniture and prototyping it in this little factory in Vietnam. And it was incredible. OSHA would be horrified because these machines they would take like a...
I told him this the other day. Keep going. I want to go back to that in a second.
They'd take like a car engine or something, and hook up a belt to it and run a saw.
You did tell me this the
I
other
told you
day.
this the
You
other
did
day.
tell me this
It
the
was
other day.
all of it was just it was crazy, and the noise in there was just unbelievable.
Yeah, but how used to you how we're sorry if I can speak actually.
You can't. It's
I mean,
fine.
developing getting actually a Wyoming, Montana wood shop. Kind of like, well, how do I get this done? To get this fence completed.
right.
Like, I got to kind of MacGyver this thing together.
Oh, no, these guys were unbelievable.
So you
I
walk
mean-
into this MacGyver, like, this is like the culture of just like, well, what turns something?
Oh, right.
Well, that car engine does.
Exactly.
Those wheels don't work anymore. Bring the car engine in. Let's actually hook a belt up to this.
These guys were brilliant. I mean, they'd whip up a machine in front of your eyes if you had a special thing that you wanted to do. They're, oh, yeah, we could do that. And they'd
Here's
tear
some duct
apart
tape
one
and a
machine
paper
and
clip.
they'd
Oh,
put something
100%.
together. Yeah, no, they're super, super thrifty, and
But it worked.
Oh, it totally worked.
It worked,
totally
right?
worked. And
OSHA would vomit.
Yeah, they would
everywhere.
Die. Yeah,
no one died while I was there. I don't even think
exactly.
anyone lost any fingers. Probably the fireworks were more dangerous.
100%.
The mothers at the fireworks were more dangerous.
Exactly.
We walked through a facility not that long ago, and I said, "There's parts of this that remind me of." When I used to be in the fastener business, and I would go to China to tour these factories that are producing nails and staples and screws, and it's literally just hot metal flying as fast as you can, and they're wearing like T-shirts if they have a shirt on at all, and shorts and flip flops, and they got it's 50 stories tall. That they're doing this, and it's all bamboo scaffolding that they've made that morning, and they're just sort of tucked together. It's terrifying for us at 100%. And everybody gets it, and it works there.
Yeah,
it works. Absolutely. Nobody gets hurt.
It's so true.
Everything's fine.
Absolutely.
But it just.
So you have a conversation with this furniture guy. He's like, "Yeah, I need a designer, but I need him in Vietnam." Well, I'll go to Vietnam. Okay, I'm going to Vietnam. So what was that conversation like when you back to your wife and be like, "Hey, we're going to go back to Vietnam for 3.5 months during the summer"?
Right. No, it was great because I can remember coming home. We had a tiny little apartment in Capitol Hill, and I can remember coming home and sitting down and saying, you won't believe what just happened today. And I replayed the whole story
after lunch.
for her.
I went over to the
yeah, right. And Nicole had. We had a really unique situation. She's always had some golden star following her around, I think. But Nicole ended up coming over with me and working in an orphanage when I was there. And her work, she worked for an adoption agency, and they said, "Yeah, this sounds incredible. Take this time off and go do this thing." So she was able to take a leave of absence from her work and go over, and we ended up doing that 2 summers in a row, going to Vietnam. And Nicole worked for this Christina Noble Foundation that supports street children and runs an orphanage, and I was doing the
She
furniture
is a golden
design.
star. She's your own golden star.
Right.
What an incredible opportunity for the both of you, and not only that, but I don't think that there's not a tremendous amount of people out there, one, that would step up and go, "I'll go to Vietnam and do it," and then second, for the other side of the spouse or the significant other to go, "You know what? I'll go with you, and I'll find something." So like catered in, and then like to make it such a powerful trip for the both of you.
Right.
Unbelievable.
No, that's pretty
true.
Rad. That's true. We've been super fortunate that she's been also super open, and she'll make opportunities for herself anywhere she goes. And so that ended up being a pretty profound experience for both of us to live in Vietnam those summers. And just kind of a funny quick story here. The second summer when I was in Vietnam, this guy that ran the factory, his name is Mr. Quy, he said, "Jamie, we've got a very important guest coming today. You look busy or something." I don't remember what he said, but this guy...
Is this like the Mr. Miyagi? Or
right. Be working.
So
apparently our factory had a newspaper article published in the Tokyo Times, and it was read by one of these Iron Chef guys. And this guy,
that's exactly what I was thinking.
His last name was Watanabe. He came and to the factory. He was opening a Vietnamese-themed restaurant in Tokyo called Vietnam Alice. And so he flew with his whole entourage to our factory and was walking around the factory floor looking at these various designs that I'd created. And ended up buying a bunch of this furniture and saying, "Hey, I need certain pieces for these different parts of the restaurant." So I got to design these various custom pieces for the restaurant. And then a year later went and saw this in Vietnam Alice in Tokyo. It was unbelievable. It was a really kind of surreal experience.
For sure.
Vietnam Alice.
To be part of it, to see it, and then to see it
see it actually in the restaurant in situ is pretty interesting. So this was around 98, 99 when we were in Vietnam. So kind of fast forwarding, spitting out of graduate school where you spend your whole time kind of in your head designing things. I ended up doing my graduate thesis in a little village in Kenya, designing a healthcare facility, and I had an opportunity to study in Denmark, furniture design. I did lots of design kind of oriented things in school. Well, I got my first job out of graduate school, and I'll withhold the name of the firm. People probably out me anyways, and nothing wrong with the firm. It was a great firm. But my point being, I was put in a retail studio, and I was designing pottery barns. And to go from graduate school to this, milieu where the sky's the limit. Your creative juices are flowing. To be space planning pottery barns, like I literally thought I died and got into hell. I said, I don't know how I can do this.
No bueno.
So my graduate thesis advisor was at NBBJ, and was part of the healthcare studio, and he ended up bringing me. Said, Jamie, why don't you come in to the healthcare studio? We're doing some interesting stuff. Your graduate thesis work was on healthcare. You're interested in that sort of thing. Why don't you come be part of our studio? So I got a job at NBBJ, and what I think really had served me well at my time designing as pottery barns is I was using a new program that called MicroStation, a Bentley product.
Okay.
I think they're still around. But it was right at the beginning of when people were talking about BIM and building information models.
Interesting.
And designing three-dimensionally so that you could understand how these bits and pieces came together as you're building out this 3D environment. And that ended up serving me super well at NBBJ because I'm fresh out of graduate school. You don't graduate having a lot of tangible skills.
Right.
And I was the partner who led the studio, and my direct boss, a guy named Jerry Yin. He is a Shanghainese man, brilliant guy that could sketch in perspective upside down. Like he'd put the paper in and he'd sketch upside down. So it was oriented to you.
Such an incredible talent.
Unbelievable. All the occlusions were, he would just know that they were there. So there was never any erasing or lines crossing for occlusions. I mean, I don't know how he did it, but
it's magical.
No, I've had a couple of guys that in my career just basically like, well, it looks like this. And I'm like, are you drawing it for me? Or are you drawing it? Are you going to switch the paper? He's like, no, just let it develop.
They draw it better upside down than I can do it right
absolutely.
side up.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's crazy.
Unbelievable.
But this guy, one thing that he didn't do was a lot of computer stuff. And so he would come up with kind of some rough designs, and he'd say, hey, you put this into BIM, create this thing three-dimensionally, and then spit out renderings and other things so we can look at it and we can also communicate to our clients what we're doing. And so that's really where I got this exposure to this world of BIM and representation and how do we tell a story about this building and how do we convey the essence of this design so that we can explain to others what we're trying to do. And it was very, very fortunate that a lot of my cohort who were also at NBBJ at the time, they were spending their time redlining and doing things that I just would have slit my wrists if I had to do it.
You about did.
And I almost did.
Right, almost.
And I was able to play around on the design side because I had this specific skill set of being able to create these 3D models. At the time, not a lot of people were able to do that. So it's probably a super, super long circuitous route to say kind of how
this is perfect.
These were really laying the seeds for me of what I would eventually, do in starting Studio 216. There's one more kind of piece to the story of how things come together. Nicole and I, again, always looking for opportunities. How could we live overseas? How can we work overseas? Jerry, being from Shanghai, he said, hey, listen, I have an opportunity for you. You're really interested to be in Shanghai. My classmate that I went to school with in China is looking for a designer. Why don't you come over, and in Shanghai we've got a huge competition that we're working on, massive building project. Why don't you come over and work as a designer for a period of time and see if you like.
Isn't there an NBBJ office in Shanghai?
So this was prior to that office.
Maybe there is now. Right?
There is now. Jerry was the one that set up the office for that in Shanghai. Yeah.
Look at you foreshadowing.
Yeah. Right.
Spoiler alert.
He was the foreshadowing guy.
Yeah, right.
Foreshadowing, and then spoiler alert guy over here.
So I ended up Nicole again took a leave of absence, and we moved to Shanghai
because she can, because she's a golden star,
right? Exactly.
Because she just says, "Yeah, I want to do this," and they're like, "Okay."
Yeah,
exactly.
Tell
can
us
I
when
meet
you're
Nicole?
Right. She's the one you should have on here. She's all right. But
she's awesome.
So as a part of this design competition, we ended up using a local rendering guy in Shanghai. And this guy, Zhao Fan is his name, had his own visualization company, and he didn't really speak a whole lot of English. But Jerry and I would go over to Zhao's office, and Jerry would talk to him in Mandarin and do his famous sketches, and Zhao would kind of build things, in front of us and create these visualizations. And he had a whole team of people there doing that. And so that kind of just lodged in my head
from a rendering standpoint.
From a rendering standpoint, we were paying $3,000-$4,000 for each rendering when I was working at NBBJ, and I was seeing this guy cranking out renderings, and so that kind of made an impression on me when I was there of like, oh my gosh, these guys
this is where
are
the business
super
guy.
Right, this is where the business
comes back in. I like
sure.
that. Yeah,
of seeing these incredibly skilled people who were just focused on this, singular activity,
opportunity.
And I know this gets weird, and I'll give you the Cliff's notes of this. I had, I think, a 3-month period where I'd signed up to do this competition in Shanghai, and then I was going to Rome with the University of Washington. I had found a way to do a teaching gig over there with the UW to bring students over to the house in Rome.
Interesting.
In Campo dei Fiori. So I had this little window of time after living in China. I was now living in Rome, leading this graduate program for architecture with Trina Dinas and Galen Mina. And it was kind of out of it at this period of time when I was in Rome, away from doing the day-to-day architecture, that I made this connection of, gosh, I could start a company where I could offer these services and not have to do the drudgery of what I consider drudgery of like all this really heavy technical stuff and redlining, et cetera. And so I ended up starting with a buddy of mine, Boaz Ashkenazi. We ended up co-founding Studio 216, and we're actually started the work when we were there in Rome with MBBJ as our first client. So we had a way to kind of test the waters of setting up what started out as a pure rendering business while we were teaching in Rome. And that's kind of that's what got the ball rolling for us.
Unbelievable. First off, I'm trying to, I drew a map, and I'll show it in a second here, but we're talking Wyoming, Montana, North Carolina, Czech Republic, New Jersey, Denmark, Vietnam, Seattle, Shanghai, Rome. This is basically what I've come up with, and I'll make sure that this gets put online.
Right.
And then we end up somewhere around here, which is wherever it's going to be at the end.
Bainbridge.
Right.
That's where we'll go. Eventually we'll end up there. But man, everywhere. But
in these 3-month, 4-month increments, right? Of just like
but learning and working the entire way in a lot of reality. I mean, each place that you're going to is not just this, whimsical vacation for you, as much as it is in our minds to go to these places. It is work. It's legitimately for a business structure, but you've also figured out how to incorporate both into that element.
Right.
So if I'm going to be here, how do I take business there?
Right.
Or if I'm here but I want to be there, how do I take this business there?
Right.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. No.
What a trip.
It's
so in Rome, you start 216.
Yes. Yep.
Just because you're like, hey, I know they've got this project coming up. Let's ask them if we can actually do some renderings for them, because we kind of have the skill set for it, and we can probably make it happen.
Right. Yeah, it was a pretty safe way to start a new business. I think things have probably changed a little bit, but when I graduated from architecture school, architects made almost nothing. And so
do they make more now?
Let me check the numbers. I'm just getting the numbers in. No, same amount. Same exact amount.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Not a lot is actually the number one answer.
Right. And so I had Spencer, our first, he was 2 years old, and I kind of had that moment of like, holy holy shit, I've got to support a family. I don't know that I can do this on an architect's salary. And so it didn't feel like I had a long way to fall. There wasn't a lot to lose. I knew I could always go back and work at NBBJ. We had left on great terms, and as I said, they were our biggest customer for many, many years.
A great fallback. A great
so
fallback. Should it be?
But it's all with many things in life, it's kind of timing and luck. A lot, 9/10 of it, I think, is just timing and luck.
For sure.
100%. So now you are this rendering company.
Right.
Which is known as Studio 216. You're in Rome. Studio 216 comes from...
So, another story. I'll try to keep this one short. So,
please,
as I mentioned,
I'm getting bored over here.
I'm loving this. What are you talking about? This is
so lame.
I'm kind of like...
This is incredible.
I'm in hog heaven, man.
This is incredible information.
Foreshadowing.
So don't shorten nothing for us. Make it keep the story right.
So at UW, as I mentioned, I was working in Vietnam in the summer. At UW, I had asked if they had any studio space where I could do some design work outside of the studio, and they said, "Well, we've got room 216 is open. Why don't you set up work there?" So I recruited two of my buddies from graduate school, Charlie Chu and Boaz Ashkenazi, and said, "Hey guys, I've got some design projects. Why don't you come in? We'll set up a little shop here and do some freelance work." And so we kind of, we were always doing competitions or doing side design work, and we always went under this moniker of 216, Studio 216, which was the actual studio that they had given us to set up a little shop in. So I don't know that they would do that anymore at UW.
I'm
but
sure.
Those times
it's all
were the halcyon times of the 90s. I think that stuff flew in the 90s.
Yeah, sure. I think in some ways it still does. It depends, It's all who you know. It's all who you know. So now you're Studio 216. You're here. You're doing the work as a rendering producer. You working with just NBBJ, and then it spills out. Into more of the world.
It was a perfect timing to start a visualization company because everyone was right in this transitional period. It was uncanny. Every architecture firm that we went into and said, "Hey, are you need help with renderings or building 3D models?" Everyone to the letter would say, "Yeah, we were just talking about that. We've heard that there's this thing called BIM. We've heard that you can do this stuff where we need to figure out a plan. We see other people are starting to move that way. How can you help us?" So, for many years, we didn't do an ounce of marketing. It was all we could do to just keep up with people who were requesting.
Pushing projects your way, making it happen.
We need a rendering. We need a rendering. We need a rendering. So, again, we were super fortunate to get in at the time where there wasn't, we still don't have a ton of rendering competition that's based here in the Pacific Northwest. But for many years, we were the only game in town.
Interesting.
And so we really, we were in a really fortunate position to not have any competitors. That's
awesome.
And just kind of work on the craft and figure out how we can do this. And, we did really well there. So, I think what has kept Studio 216 moving is we have always been interested in the technology side of things. And as rendering then transitioned to animation, where we were essentially, just doing 30 renderings a second and creating little video pieces and storytelling, as that became more and more sophisticated, we started getting access to more and more interesting softwares and hardwares. And it was really... I think that a pivotal milestone for us is when Palmer Luckey created this thing called Oculus in his basement and Facebook bought it.
Yeah.
Suddenly there was this gold rush of, everyone was talking about virtual reality.
Right.
And for the space that we were occupying at the time, a focus just on architectural visualization, it was a no-brainer to say, oh my gosh, we're building 3D representations of these spaces that don't yet exist. Imagine if we could make them, actually three-dimensional.
Sure.
And so that's what really got us. It was a very logical connection to move forward with that, and it was through some of these early explorations we'd done in VR that Microsoft actually found us and said, "Hey, we're working on this new super secret piece of hardware. We can't tell you the name of it. We can't tell you what it does or anything about it. But
rhymes with Balo Benz.
right. But you wanna sign away all your rights and sign your life away and sign up for this thing. We thought, that sounds like a good idea.
I went to Vietnam and almost got killed a couple of times by the engine.
Sounds risky enough to be interesting.
Sounds right up my alley.
So they they came in. They had a security detail that came in and swept our office, and they made us install a safe and a video camera that was pointed at the safe, and it was just like, it was unbelievable,
like James Bond-esque.
It's like James Bond-esque, and then they bring out this shiny
codes.
Golden thing.
Yeah, the switches, the keys, right? Yeah.
But it turned out to be HoloLens.
Okay.
And what served Microsoft really well with this product development versus some in the past is, this time, instead of creating an artificial market for HoloLens, they said, hey, we want you to bring an actual customer that has an actual problem to solve in order to be included in this program.
Yeah.
And so there were 7. There were
You
7.
probably had one right there at the top of your list.
Right.
Like, well, we got this today.
Yeah, right. So they brought in 7 different companies to build software for the HoloLens, and each company, they sort of, quote, represented a different market vertical. And so we were the sort of the AEC CRE experts who were going to bring in a partner. And so we ended up bringing in Skanska for 2&U, and out of that partnership, that was Lisa Picard and her vision. She was always a very visionary of interested in exploring new ways of doing things and new technology, and an
absolute driver of it specifically for the construction industry. Skanska being lucky enough to be a large global company that's developing the project as well as building the project.
Exactly. So they were in the perfect position because they had this project at 2&U, and they, it was a fairly revolutionary idea of how do we take this tower and lift it up, several stories, and basically make a giant umbrella out of it with this urban kind of space underneath it that's a public space. So they had a very innovative concept, and they wanted to pair kind of the marketing side of this with really innovative technology. And they said, "Ooh, HoloLens could be a neat way to show that and tell that story." So it was out of that partnership that we created the world's first mixed reality leasing center. And we used HoloLens as a tool for brokers to lead potential tenants through the project and convey three-dimensionally.
Is this about the same time that Ready Player One came out? Because I'm thinking like that this is basically you building the Oasis for this project,
right? It's got to be just before, I think, before the movie came out.
So we're talking to actual holiday. Do you have any Easter eggs in this thing?
Okay, exactly.
Do you have any, or is this Og? Which one is this guy?
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
Well, and this is so for me. It's wildly fascinating to see that because I worked on that project for a long time. But to see this from the architectural side with just this architect Picard Chilton, very well known across the United States, but has not done a bunch of work here. But they are just drivers, and they are just incredible firm. And then Skanska, who wants to take this piece of property that is a prime, gorgeous, stunning piece of real estate that they had here in Seattle.
That was absolutely doing nothing.
Nothing. Absolutely. It was already not occupied with all of these other buildings that were nothing.
Yeah, just really bad.
Then they're going to create this building on stilts, this massive 2-part
it's
tower
one of my favorite projects downtown right now.
On
it really,
stilts.
really is.
Beautiful project.
And then we don't want a podium like every other building that exists.
We want a village.
We want a village.
Yeah.
We want a space under here that you can actually go into and feel like you're not in the normal part of downtown like you have. But how do we get that to the world to have people understand that this is where you want to be ahead of a rendering? How do I really engage these people early in this to get them to understand?
It's a pretty bold statement to say the world's first virtual leasing center.
Yeah.
Isn't that is that correct?
Yeah.
That's got to be incredible.
First mixed reality leasing center. So
dive into that mixed reality for a little bit.
So,
I'd like to actually hear your take on what mixed reality really is and how that affects.
Microsoft has kind of coined their own way to talk about another way people often refer to this as XR or extended reality. But
that's the other term I wanted to ask about. But go ahead.
So mixed reality sort of encompasses this idea that you have a spectrum.
Okay.
And on one side of the spectrum, you have augmented reality. That's where in this physical environment here together, and we're putting digital pixels into this environment. We're augmenting it with additional information. So let's call that the left side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is virtual reality, where we're no longer sitting here in this office in Redmond anymore. We're maybe on the moon or we're in the Caribbean. We're in a virtual environment, completely immersed in this environment. And mixed reality is this notion that you can seamlessly move back and forth between AR and VR along the spectrum. You can slide seamlessly back and forth through the spectrum. And the way that they can do that is because we have a headset on, we're looking through a transparent lens, so I can still see you, but then I can also see augmented information in that, or to the extent that the screen allows, I can also put you into a more virtual scene. Space. And with HoloLens 2, which has just been released, it has even twice the field of view, and so it's an even more immersive headset where you really can feel like you're in a virtual environment.
Really,
that's incredible, and it's so fascinating to watch here locally because we're sort of in the epicenter of that world in so many ways. I'm a video gamer. Mm-hmm. I love playing video games. I've been waiting for VR. I've been begging for VR since like 1991, at least, when I first started to get a taste of them fantasizing.
That was like when you went to the arcades and there was actually the holographic games, right?
Oh yeah.
Remember those holographic games where it was kind of like a triangle, and then it was like the guy that draw first, draw, or something like that.
So all of that and it took forever. It felt like to get it.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And so. I've been Oculus Rift, Oculus Go, Sony PlayStation, all in that world, but it didn't seem like ever at a point it was going towards marketing the abilities of virtual reality as a business platform until I started to really hear what HoloLens was doing.
Right. And I've read various things, but I think initially Microsoft thought this would be more of a gaming application, but the hardware is incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And so they knew no gamer was going to buy this $3,500 headset.
Yeah,
and so they said
eight people per state would make the kind of money probably, right? Eight diehard gamers.
Exactly.
So not going to really pay the bills at HoloLens.
It sort of de facto became more of an enterprise application. And so most people who are developing for HoloLens are catering to the enterprise.
Yeah. Brilliant, though, because they and with the facility using these projects that are already there are pushing it into where it needs to be. That's the lane that it really needs to be in, because that's been desperately wanted by the industry for a long time.
Well, just from a client standpoint, I mean, dealing with the owners and developers and understanding how they're going to take a project performa and bring it into a space of be like, look, we want to develop 2+U. Here's a 40-story tower. Here we want apartments. We want this. This is how it's going to pencil. Here's your numbers. Here's the Excel worksheet that's going to, this is how we get the ROI back and everything. But show me what it looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Whatever multi-million-dollar project it is, it's now like, well, we can build a model of it. That's kind of been, I mean, you've obviously shared the history. This is literally a history lesson of kind of how this visualization has kind of come to be, because it's been this understanding of like, well, we'll build a model of it. Okay, build it a little bit bigger. You know what I mean? Or how can we see what's inside those rooms? Okay, we'll build a mock-up of a room.
Right.
Or we'll look at this, and then just the understanding of it, so they can even start, pre-leasing the spaces. They can actually get their clientele from like tenants to say, okay, hey, look, we're going to be doing this. Like, you want to come and be a part of this eventually, like sign these memo of understandings. They're going to get there. Yeah. But how do they like really get to the point of like now developing the first leasing center that's like a virtual reality leasing center? Mm-hmm. I mean, how was that accepted from not necessarily developer side, but also from just like the tenant side, the public side, coming in and actually interacting with that? Did you guys have to manage that? Did you guys have to go down that path? I mean,
there was some training of the brokers.
Okay.
And this was the first kind of iteration, both of our software and people figuring out the hardware. So it definitely took some additional effort, I think, for all the parties to become familiar with how do we use this, but I think that was a big draw. People were just interested in the experience as much as anything.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
It was a great way to get people to come and experience the building, because they were also interested in, I've heard about this, I've read about this.
You're
I actually want to see it.
For sure. You're going to generate a crowd.
I mean, I experience in architecture daily. I think a lot in 3D. I can see things very easy. If it's a 2D format, I can see, okay, I can understand how that works, interacts with that adjacent material, or how that happens. But I'm just explaining stuff just to bring it to my world, my wife, of like, hey, look, honey, see, this is really cool. You know what I mean? Or from a potential tenant that's going to come in and be like, look, here's a 1,100 square foot apartment.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, what? Like, it doesn't exist. How can I see it?
Right.
Yeah, no, I think there's a whole level, and I've been in hundreds of meetings, we both have, where you're with the developer, you're with the tenant, you're with anybody, and they're posing all of this design or all these aesthetics, and they're like, great, I get it.
Here's a sample board of products, like, look and fill the carpet.
Exactly.
But what's it going to look like?
Right.
That's always the question.
And we're like, well, we just showed you. That's what it's going to look like.
We're going to raise the ceiling a little bit. We're going to add a soffit over here. We're going to have this condition come down. It's going to be great. We're going to put that up on a curb. We're going to set that in a channel. Great.
Too many words, Brad.
What is that
going to look like?
Yeah.
Even a meeting today, what's that going to look like? And that's a legitimate question. If I'm paying, any millions of dollars,
right?
Well, what's it going to look like?
It is interesting because you've got kind of two sides of this coin here. From the design perspective, you want to try to reduce those cycles. You want to get buy-in. You want to be able to clearly, quickly, effectively convey what your design intent is and what you want this thing to look like. From the other side, from the stakeholder, they want to know what is this going to be like at the end of the day? How is this? Am I going to like this? Is this, how do I understand this? And we all know, you mentioned your mother or your wife.
Yeah.
We all know, looking at a 2D plan and trying to make sense of that. And then, I went to graduate school, and I still have to orient the plan and get my elevation set up and look at the section.
Well, how many people stab themselves in their eyes? Oh, wait, this guy at Pottery Barn actually this guy almost did it constantly, right? So the motivation of it, but then, like I said, too many words. This is where it's at. How do I triangulate this in my brain? Where does it work out? But how seamless is it for that tenant or that a potential tenant that's going to come in, put on the headset or put on the hardware, work with that, take a 5 to 10 minute orientation, and then no words have to be spoken.
Yeah.
You just have to experience it.
Right.
It literally is just diving into the space. You talk about immersive technology, which I want to get your take on, and how immersive but seamless, and you kind of don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
It's
well, what's super exciting that has been a fairly recent development for us is we've now developed the tech that allows us to be completely immersive, untethered, and where you can walk, over to objects and past objects. Oh. And so we're creating a digital.
Show me the way to San Jose, right, Jamie?
So we're creating a digital twin of an environment. And here's a classic use case. So I think I mentioned earlier, we're subleasing a portion of B+H Architects.
Gotcha.
Floor space, and they had an open section of the floor that they would like to sublease to somebody else. And so they created a little test fit. And they gave us the test fit design, and we put it into our software and aligned that test fit digital twin with the actual physical open floor plate. Now, this floor plate had construction debris piled over on one side, and it was a storage area for the leftover office. So it didn't look pretty to show. But what we were able to do is align the digital twin you could either be in a HoloLens, you can be on a phone or a tablet, or however you want to experience this. Anywhere you look, you're seeing the new design, and you can walk up and past objects and look at it. So it's like a window into the future of what the space could look like.
My goodness.
And then you can even interact with that environment now. So if you say, I like that chair here, but I wish this desk configuration was moved over here, you can touch your screen and you can drag it to a different location. This is full scale augmented reality
Mixed
because
reality or augmented
or mixed reality. It could be really
still getting used to the terms, but yeah.
Right. So you can actually be in the environment, and in this case, I would call this more of an augmented experience because we're actually in their office in this open floor plate, and I'm just augmenting it with a vision of the future.
Interesting.
But what's cool is that you don't have to be in that environment. I can show you that office here in this studio here. I can bring it up on my phone or a tablet or a headset, and we can look at the virtual environment of what it would look like as if we were standing there. So I can also show you a virtual application of that exact
my
same
wife
space.
couldn't make the appointment, right?
Right. And so here's another option for you of what we've done with our software is we have networked devices together. So you can be here in Redmond, maybe your wife is in Bellevue. You guys can join together. She can be on a phone, and you can be on your computer, and you can be in this environment together. And as she is moving and manipulating things,
Like, no,
you're
honey,
connected
I don't
with
like
voice
that.
over IP, and you can, in real time, see what the other person is doing.
Wow.
And you're collaborating across devices, connected with voice over IP, making these full-scale or real-scale manipulations in real time. So,
And this is 100% a real thing that Studio 216 is doing right now.
yeah, absolutely. Day in and day out.
This is old technology, Walker.
Right? I know. I'm like,
This is old technology.
Salivating and just
me too.
frothing at the mouth. And then they're probably like, no, that's like three gens back. Doesn't even make sense.
This is so when I was doing a little researching and Googling, to kind of find out a little bit about it. When I read your slogan, like it kind of got me a little bit like, exactly.
Whoever wrote the copy for that should get an extra $500
Oh, wow.
because it was phenomenal.
Let me read it. So it says digital. So 216 is a digital productions agency helping others and clients experience unbuilt. I'm totally
wrecked
correcting it right now.
1,000%.
So a digital production agency helping clients experience the unbuilt environment using virtual reality, visualization, mobile application to craft the story of place.
Oh,
God, that's so great.
craft the story of
Right.
place.
The hairs on the back of your neck are standing up.
Yeah.
That's arousing. That is phenomenal.
That's great, man.
I have two things that I want to touch on real quick. Renderings, to jump back a touch. Renderings changed the industry in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Renderings gave people I don't get what this looks like, though.
Mm-hmm.
Axioms were kind of a thing that you could sort of two-dimensionally give a little bit more to, but the rendering added a color, flare, a tree,
Right.
Sometimes subjectively parts of the actual block
Right.
behind it.
Right.
So it was a little bit of its own mixed reality.
Right.
And then the renderings would be done, and they'd pay for them in the very beginning of the project. And then the project would go through 9 iterations,
Right.
and they would still be pointing to renderings, and the renderings looked half close to what the building actually looked like.
Right. Right.
So they became somewhat useless to the actual project. Now it seems like they're actually updating renderings, which is so amazing to see as well. Like to see the progression of rendering
Right.
through the process. And sometimes it's a rendering of sometimes they give you a cocktail napkin sketch of, well, go render it.
Right.
Right. So you're like, okay, hopes and dreams, and there's a rainbow and a unicorn over
Absolutely.
here. So I'm sure as that becomes something, the renderings, continue to become pretty unbelievably impressive.
Yeah.
Where some renderings, I really have to do a second
photograph.
a
Yeah.
second glance and be
Right.
like, is it?
No, the craft has gotten
Just awesome.
Yeah, you can really geek out on the renderings and put dust on the floor and you can make it look like a photograph.
It's
Yeah.
unbelievable just on its own. And then I find this fascinating for this industry because it's construction, architecture are wildly pushing the limits every day and are still so far behind all the time. Because there's a couple people at the very front that are pulling the industry forward, and then there's a billion people in the middle who are like, whoa, wait. Because you talk about BIM, and BIM took over in a big way, specifically on the architectural side, on the development side. the contractors took a lot longer to get up to speed on and are still just now getting into it. And then beyond that, the subcontractors are still way beyond because it still hasn't caught up the way that it needs to.
Right.
With this reality that's being created for touring, understanding, just now recently, there was a big product where a local organization, architect and a general contractor rented out warehouse space and created an entire floor of a hospital out of cardboard.
Right.
Which is not
common.
uncommon.
Yeah.
It's a common theme. But then in my mind, I'm thinking that's still so many steps back from what could be happening.
Now that one's kind of a head scratcher for us as well. And ironically, we haven't done a lot of those. They do that a lot in healthcare.
A lot in
where
healthcare.
you do cardboard mock-ups. They're busing physicians and nurses out, to a warehouse somewhere outside of town. That's a very natural application of where virtual reality would make a lot more sense because you could actually interact with photorealistic looking, head walls and different things, and you can actually, quickly iterate on the fly and say, no, that's too far away. Yeah. Well, here, let me just move this thing over closer to you, and then you try. You've got a different arm span. So no, that's a great natural application of that.
It seems like it would be so much more beneficial.
Right.
Quick side note, if anybody needs extra cardboard for your healthcare project, I've got Amazon boxes for days. Call me. I'll send it out to you.
Or better yet, call me and you won't even need to use the cardboard.
Hey.
Even better. No, it's recently just happened here. And so that caught my eye as like, I get what you're doing. However, stop, don't.
Right. Well, and not to mention even just the environmental impact. I mean, it's so cool working with pixels every day because, you can iterate to your heart's content. You're not burning, any resources.
No, you're not. You're not. Time and that's it. That's another huge piece. That environmentally, I never even thought about that, but
you're consistently blowing Walker's mind, by the way. This is great.
I've sat in a puddle.
And this just seems so typical for Jamie.
He's also nonchalant. Like, so what? I do the coolest stuff ever in architecture.
World's
and
first leasing center.
I do all this cool things that nobody knows, about.
No, and Walker actually made this comment earlier as far as like you were the kind of selling that first plane that ever kind of existed in this world, and it's a. Like, this machine can fly. You got to be kidding me. That's 7,000,000 pounds. How can this get off the ground? Well, physics,
Bumblebees fly.
Bumblebees fly. Why not?
This'll work.
No, but that's where I wanted to kind of go next is understanding, like, you're looking at these technologies, and so much part of Studio 216 is actually, I think just by nature, has been kind of on the forefront of just understanding where VR XR, AR, those mixed reality sessions go. How does this affect the overall architectural industry, and where's that next step, or what is like one or two of those things that you're seeing now that we'll be able to kind of like just watch out for or look into? I mean,
right.
I'm curious on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got several thoughts.
Sure.
Rattling around up there.
Just take one.
Let's take one at a time.
Let's take that one
at a time
and put it on the shelf.
So I think that where this will inevitably go, in my mind, is that this concept of the digital twin is going to become more and more important.
That's a huge term right there, digital twin. This is really interesting
because you start off, you think of kind of the life cycle of a design project. Obviously, you've got this whole design phase where you're just trying to make the best looking design, and you want it to flow right, you want the proportions to be right, all the kind of design considerations that you make. That can all be done with this digital twin. And then you move into the phase where you're constructing it. And this is the piece that I feel like is going to be the next. Well, let me back up really quickly.
Well,
so I think the design
fine to me
side,
so far.
the design side and the leasing side has been kind of the typical place where we have met a need.
Sure.
We've helped people, the designers, understand what this thing is going to look like and communicate it to the stakeholders, and then we've helped the brokers and the developers pre-lease or sell these properties by converting that same asset into a marketing application.
Right.
But it strikes me that there are two more kind of bubbles of opportunity with this digital twin. One is on the construction side, and then the next will be on kind of the facilities side of maintaining and operating this building.
Sure.
Because
I was hoping is going to go here because this is a big part of us. Go ahead.
Huge.
Yeah, right. So, on the construction side, the ability to see what the end manifestation is supposed to be like and have a reference check as you're building and producing it seems to me like a very, very natural, valuable thing to have as a check. And to understand or maybe even access information of, I know I need to build this HVAC. Let me access this digital twin and pull up some information of the specs of this, this piece of equipment here, or the glazing, or whatever is going to be in your world. Like, we can embed so much rich data that can be fed seamlessly in from the programs that are already working, where we can pull and expose this information inside the digital twin, and then democratize that information so anyone on the job site can be on a phone or a headset or however they want to consume that information. They can then access it and use it to validate. We know a huge part of the cost of these buildings is in both on the waste and in doing things incorrectly and having to tear it out and redo it again. The ability to minimize that is a huge opportunity. So I think that's kind of one bucket of opportunity. And then once you've created this asset, there's no reason that asset should be thrown away at any point in the life cycle of this building. That's an incredible asset to use to now link all your IoT data into this digital twin, where you can see the rate of airflow coming through a duct, and you can see, there's a sensor going off. Well, before I send a guy out to the actual building to go look at that, this VAV that I'm getting an erroneous reading on, only to find that the ladder he brought, this is above an atrium, a 20-foot atrium, he brought a 6-foot ladder. We just wasted all his time of going out there. Why not have just looked at the digital twin, see, oh my gosh, that's right into this atrium. Hey, we better prepare for that so we can go out and and service that correctly. And then once he's on site or she's on site, the ability then to leverage that information and call back into a virtual expert and say, hey, I'm looking at this thing, but I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking at here, and have a person at Command Central seeing through the eyes of this person in the field and circling it and saying, no, it's this meter here, and change this valve or spark plug over here. And so there's a kind of a whole world of opportunity where we can leverage this asset for so many different things. And
I'm glad you're blowing his brain right now.
Yeah.
This is great. Just watch this.
No, but
just watch this right now.
So what you're saying
is, so what you're actually
take this incredible piece and keep it applicable in so many ways, all for the same, general goodness of the project and the building, and just find all of these applicable means and methods and push them through.
Absolutely. I mean, my prediction is that in the future, this digital twin will be a very, very valuable asset. The people who own the digital twins of these buildings will be
these assets.
Will have an incredible asset portfolio, because anytime you want to do a TI or a renovation, you're going to access this digital twin. You're going to understand where the hidden chases are, where the electrical wires are. You're going to
so
have
it brings a whole new
to
definition to as-built drawings, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other direction I wanted to ask on that is that, like, can anybody really kind of feed this digital twin? Is it a place where you can kind of add to it to say, from an as-built standpoint? So one of the things we deal with or are kind of being introduced to from a products application standpoint is, this whole aspect of sending guys out to field measure to make sure that the products can be made correctly, or if it's a guaranteed dimension thing on a 2D format, and then all of a sudden the steel guy's tolerances because of the schmelter, like all these different factors work. So what we're seeing is kind of enter our space is this 3D scanning material, right?
Yep.
So I'm curious, how are those individuals that are kind of the artisans of the work, right? They actually do the application, they understand it, they get the thermal value tolerances, they have these engineering standards in their head after these 35 years of experience of like, leave that a 16th short because you want to make sure that the X, Y, and Z happens.
Right.
So how is that feeding itself to get smarter, and how are these digital twins enabled to actually then receive that education, receive that information, so it then can actually like feed itself for that next project?
Yeah.
Or, I'm curious on that.
I don't know the exact status of development of that, if someone's attacking that exact problem right now, but I think there is absolutely the opportunity. There's no reason that can't be done.
Sure.
Of having some sort of AI ML layer that runs on top of this digital twin that understands and gets smarter with each building project of like, oh, I consistently see that we're cutting this thing a 16th inch too short. I'm going to flag that prior, so you make sure you don't do that.
Interesting.
It leads me to kind of another thought. What we've seen in the process, for many, many years, we've been focused on AEC-CRE. That's been our bread and butter. That's what we've done.
Sure.
We've, in the past probably 18 to 24 months, we've come to understand that now that we have this virtual environment, there are all kinds of interesting different things that we can do with this.
Right.
And so we have customers.
Oh, yeah. Lots of interesting stuff. Anyways, go ahead.
So we have built out the functionality with our Altura platform where we can provide virtual training in the context of a virtual environment. And so just take 1 second to kind of introduce this concept of the information worker versus the frontline worker. Are you guys familiar with this concept? So
I'm sure we are.
I'm going to say we 100% are, but just for somebody who's listening and doesn't know.
Yeah, so, you told us before, Jamie.
Right. Yeah. So the information worker, this is the person that is in front of their computer all day long. They use their computer to do their work. And it's typically the world that software companies have targeted in the past because it's easy to serve software to someone who's sitting in front of a computer. Believe the numbers are there are roughly 1.1 billion information workers in the world today. There's a larger segment of the employed population that are called frontline workers or first line workers, and these are the people whose immediate environment is critical for them to perform their job. So anyone in the construction industry, for example.
What's the ratio there?
I think it's about 1.3 billion frontline workers versus 1.1 billion first-line workers. So there's actually more, 55, whatever that is, 57% people are first-line workers. And this is the world that people who are in my line of work with extended reality, these are the consumers of extended reality.
That's what I was just going to write down. This is awesome.
This is our target audience because we want to provide these people access to information about their environment.
Yes.
And give it to them in a timely, accessible, consumable manner.
No, that is incredible. Where my brain has been, and I've been listening, I trust me, I've been listening for the most part, but my brain just keeps going to how many applicable worlds this type of machine
technology.
It lives in. Like I think of everything that we have, most technology that we have, everything starts as a big machine and it gets smaller as we get smarter about it, right? So you think of a computer that used to fill up room after room after room and could do like 1/2 meg of data a day. Right. And now, I've got 64 gigs in literally no square inches. But if you're creating something and you're trying to launch a product or you're trying to recreate a printer or you're trying to do something, if you create it in this world, you can literally walk around like it's the Titanic.
Right.
And you can say, this is not going to work here because heat's going to come off of this. I mean, sure, you can do that in some ways now, but not to the level of being able to walk through it like it's a giant machine that you would have built 40 years ago,
Yeah.
or because that's when it was built the right way.
Right.
When it was giant, you could do it and tighten it and get it in that spot. And that's why we build things. They get a little less developed and a little less stable as we go through it, because we have to micro and shrink and get everything down.
Right.
And you like my engine in a car, right? Everybody used to be able to get in there and there's plenty of room to turn a wrench. And now you open up your hood and there's like one nano sliver of room that nobody could get into at all.
Right.
So even the concept of that on a scale model that I can walk through digitally,
or explode it and see inside of it and turn it around and see expose just the wiring diagram of it, or
But to walk through a microprocessor as if it is the engine of the Titanic,
right?
And I can go through each and every small crevice with true understanding of how it's going to interact in that moment, and that's so valuable to what's going on right now.
So to that point, there are kind of four bubbles of
keep going.
There's within kind of extended reality, you see the applications aligning generally around kind of four different uses. You've got what we've already covered. You've got this design exploration where you want to understand, you want to iterate, you want to understand the design. So that's one. You've got sales and marketing where, hey, I'm trying to show you this building or this product, and I want you to try on this virtual dress or this virtual hat or see this building.
Gotcha.
So there's that application. There's kind of a field service that I touched on briefly, this way that I can augment information in your environment and help you, in field service kind of remote expert application. And the last one is education, which you also are kind of bringing up. Yep. And kind of to your earlier point a few minutes ago, where you were talking about how can we make these digital models smart, these digital twins smart, so the 16th of an inch is propagating. We learn from that. And I think there's another huge opportunity within these training and learning scenarios where you think about buildings wildly expensive. Like, we've worked on projects that are $500 million, $1 billion projects.
Oh, yeah. Just wildly
that
expensive.
By nature is going to push people to be very conservative about how they do things. They don't want to get too far out on the leading edge because there's too much risk.
Yeah. Well, and there's also so much time involved with those projects. It's
it's a scary edge.
It's not only $575 million that you're spending, but then you're actually letting that $575 million kind of out there for like 3 years, right?
Exactly.
So what the political climate's going to be doing, what the World Trade Organizations are going to be doing to affect that $575 million ROI.
Right.
I mean, the time associated to that. I mean, just because of the technology, everything going so quickly, the security of that investment is just unspeakable.
So the point of why I bring that up is I think that what's exciting for me is the ability to show this information virtually at scale and interact with it takes a lot of that risk off the table, presumably, because now we can look at it and interact with it and run modules on top of it to explore it as if it did exist. We can see how that curtain wall may potentially fail because we can build it and we can run, AI ML algorithms on top of it to see what happens over time with rain beating down on this gasket, what happens over time. And so I would like to think that we're at a period in the construction industry that we'll see more acceleration of maybe a little more risk-taking, because we can mitigate some of that risk by doing some of these explorations virtually at scale.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much information in the construction world from a product standpoint, performance standpoint, and how that's going to be addressing that next generation of just feeding that what was that term you said, digital twin?
Yeah.
And understanding how we can collectively do it.
Then also reeling the two sides of perceived risk and actual risk.
Right.
Because to me, this, in a lot of ways, I could see a developer going, that's too much risk, because they don't understand how that actually is a risk mitigator, and it's going to work.
Well, and then
the other way.
The guy with 35 years experience has to actually come in and actually meet face to face with the developer and be like, look,
Yeah.
So here's the 3 projects he showed you pictures of. But let me tell you, right? And then the guy with like the salt, right? Like the guy that frontline worker, so to speak, right? Comes in and be like, okay, all right, settles this guy down a little bit, understand it. But like that's why I say from the beginning, like so many words go into explaining these 2D applications and design, and then all of a sudden there just kind of gets the speechless moment of just interacting with the space.
Right.
You know, because we do it every day. Like we live in this 3D environment every single day of actually to scale products, actually understanding it, driving cars, like everything that has to do with it, how natural of an experience it already is. And we're just kind of returning to that natural state of communication.
Right.
It's a really
Come
impressive. Yeah. It's a really impressive way to do it.
Super impressive.
Yeah.
Is the architectural community latching onto this for themselves?
Yeah, I would say that I feel like most architects that we interact with are using VR to some extent as part of their design processes.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different companies who focus just on that design application. So you've got great companies like Iris VR that is a direct export from Revit into a VR headset. At Studio 216, we've taken the tact that we believe that it's too early to drive a stake in the ground and say, this is what extended reality can do for you. Right. And so we sort of have fundamentally built our software application so that we can react to each of those 4 different typical applications that I mentioned before. You can use it as a design tool. You can use it as a sales and marketing tool. You can use it as an education tool. You can use it for field service. And we have customers in each of those 4 scenarios. For example, we have airlines that is using our software for their virtual simulators. So they're exploring moving away from having a physical virtual simulator, which is very, very expensive. You know, these airlines, they have pilots that are getting up at 2-3 in the morning for their slot in the simulator because they're very expensive. They got so many people they've got to go through and train. Yeah. What if you could do that in the comfort of your living room anytime you wanted? And so because it's virtual, you're able to interact with the buttons there. You're able to get the exact audio feedback that you're listening for.
Your muscle memory happens, right?
All that muscle memory. It's a very natural.
It's video games, man.
It's 100% video games. I was trying to be polite and let him, kind of finish, and then the whole time I'm going, dude, I want that.
I want to play that.
I want to play that.
No, absolutely.
I've landed some virtual planes before. Exactly. I can do that.
I'm so good at it.
I've hijacked a couple digital planes.
Right.
All kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter.
So we have that is training their retail associates in the context of a virtual store where they can walk around, they can interact with the various products selling, and they can also then interact with different avatar customer profiles. So we've got a whole system of where you can talk with a protective parent who's interested in making sure, they want the drive that monitors the vehicle speeds and et cetera that's happening for your teen driver.
Right.
Or you can interact with the techie who just wants to geek out on all this equipment. And now we're able to network together across devices, has their trainers that are based in Kansas City. They can train people all over the United States. They train 20,000 retail associates a year. They can run these virtual sessions.
My goodness.
And they can interact with different customer profiles. They can evaluate how they're doing. They can dialogue with them all within this virtual context.
Wow.
It now not only saves them the cost of all the travel of having to fly all over the United States to train these people, but they also, as someone just mentioned with the muscle memory, all these academic studies have shown that you're much more likely to retain that information if you're actually you're engaging your whole body in doing that work, because it's just we're spatial learners, and it's versus watching a video or just looking at a 2D spec. If you can actually do it, and for what you're talking about with the building industry, to be able to go in and actually build or mock up, a section of this curtain wall and understand how all the pieces go together and be able to perform that virtually and have a mentor here showing you and saying, oh, no, don't cut it there. Remember the 16th inch deal? That's a very powerful way that it gets ingrained in our bodies, and we quickly learn and are able to pass that on to the next person because we understand it in the context of our virtual environment.
Yeah, and see, whatever. That's all incredible. It's just so, like, I have so many people that I know that think that the continued virtual reality, the continued all of that is going to lead to, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie WALL-E.
Yeah.
Where all the humans basically end up just in these little
like
chairs.
Stunted.
We don't
our bone
know
density
anything.
shrinks or whatever.
Everything is just But like even for the gaming side of it, and specifically for this application, like virtual reality in the way that it is right now is so dynamic in the fact that it is, when I play some of these games with my kids, it's physically exhausting.
Right.
And it is wildly immersive where you get 100% captured in this, and you are down on the ground, and you are up you need a bunch of space, but it is not just, some guy sitting in a chair with this screen on his face.
Right.
It's wildly immersive.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, this is going to go on for 4 years.
It will be. And
so I'm going to say that you have to let us come out to the studio.
Absolutely.
We have to spend some time looking, touching, tasting, feeling.
Well, we want to bring it to you
bring
guys.
it to everybody
We
here.
want to actually take it to say, like, hey, you guys actually got to come and look at this. Like, this now, I'm just kind of getting the sense here, and hopefully you guys are too. It's like not this, like, well, this is a great subject. Let me go Google this. Like, no, let's go play.
Yeah,
right?
No, it's transformative to actually interact.
Let's go
with
do it.
You
We
kinda
have to.
You have to get your hands on it to understand the power.
Can't wait, man.
And
That's
this
gonna be
is the
impressive.
narrative for what that
This is
episode
the narrative.
will be.
Yeah.
This is the verb of it.
I literally, we could talk about this forever. I know we
100%.
gotta roll this down though.
100%. So sincerely, thank you so much.
No,
we're
thanks
gonna
for
come
having
out. We're gonna do that. We're gonna wind this down for now. We're gonna jump into the Edify top 2 really quick. I'll go first, selfishly, to set it up.
I was gonna suggest it. I was gonna suggest you go first. Yeah.
So every episode we end with an Edify top 2. It's anything that you're super obsessed with, into, passionate about, something recent, something that's
Something you
happened.
tripped over, you got bugged with. I don't care. You know what I mean?
A waiter, a cocktail, a drink, a whiskey. A lot of times for me, it's a whiskey.
a lot of times for me, it's for a coffee.
Whiskey and coffee. For me, we talked about it earlier, but my top 2, I'm going to go back to it just because it's so big for us. Having a deck on our house that we've lived in forever.
What's on that deck?
A table, chairs.
This past weekend.
That's my second. So
Okay, good.
don't steal
All
my
right,
thunder.
sorry. I want to get there.
Jerk. So to go out and just to see my kids and us to have a table we can quickly go to. We've played a game out there almost every night.
Oh,
So
like
great.
it's just an incredible amount of fun. And then I got a Traeger smoker this weekend.
Yes, you did.
So at the 4th of July gathering,
Yeah, this is impressive though.
at the 4th of July gathering, I happen to be amongst 2 incredible humans who are doing some smoke. You tell it on your own time.
I will.
But
Is this a hot smoker or a cold smoker?
a hot smoker.
A hot smoker. Okay.
So they were. One of them had brought some ribs that he had done, and then they started talking, and I got caught up and captivated in the whole process and everything. So I went out and went the super easy way, which is to go with the Traeger, and which is an electric pellet based smoker, and did a brisket, and I did it pretty close to okay. It was a 10-hour smoke, and I didn't foil it at the right time, and this and that. I'll figure it out on the next one. But I'm so excited to get in there and really just start trying this and start trying this and start trying this. So that it's opened an entire new world of food. We didn't touch on that.
No, we didn't. But I'm going to.
Okay, so those are my top 2: deck and the Traeger.
Awesome.
So, Brad introduced me to a show on Netflix called The Chef Show.
Okay.
So Jon Favreau, creator of Marvel, Iron Man, director of Iron Man, that kind of guy. He had a movie a couple years back called Chef.
Chef.
It's just called Chef, and it was inspired by while he was working on Iron Man. Gwyneth Paltrow actually brought a food truck to the set one day, and it was a Kogi food truck. They took kind of like they mixed Korean cuisine with like Southern California Mexican vibe,
Super LA Korean kimchi taco
so there's like
burrito bar.
Yeah, exactly. So he brought this Kogi food truck to the set, and Jon Favreau was so taken back by how amazing the food was. And then he got talking with the actual chef that was on the truck, and it was just one truck. He's like, "What's your story? How does this work?" So as a result, he actually he created a movie about this guy and his food truck. But Jon Favreau was now this guy. He in the movie, it's called Chef, and as a result, it's been a couple years since he's been doing it, and then he kind of went back to the chef for a couple years. He's like, "Hey, I miss cooking with you.
Yeah,
I miss like what's happening." Like,
he goes, Chef was a story about a guy who was a classically trained French cuisine chef, legit, as they say in their world, a legit chef, who ended up getting sacked and then started a food truck, which is like the lowest food form for true chefs. Right, and then he sort of proved that you can do that in both environments, and it was wildly popular amongst chefs, like legit chefs. One, because it told a story that a lot of them face, which is how can you have high level cuisine at a food truck level, and they all know that you can now. But also because it touched on a truth for them in a lot of ways, which is he did it right in the movie. So when he was actually cooking, it was the legit style, and that was the one thing that chefs always say you get wrong in movies is the cooking side. So he did it, and it became a wildly popular thing.
So he got down to this like chef thing, and he's just like, "Man, I just miss cooking with you." Like, where, because he actually traveled with him during the movie. He's like, "No, you do it this way, or tweak it this way. This is how you actually do the recipes, or if you don't have it, you improvise, all these different things." And he just missed that cathartic nature of cooking, right? And so he's like, "Oh, let's just start cooking together again." Yeah. And I'll bring my film crew and we'll see what happens. As a result, this Netflix show was born called The Chef Show. And so they go around to these various restaurants, or they maybe just kind of take a menu and they'll rework it, or they take special dishes and stuff. And
it's just like this podcast.
It really is.
You can't define what it is in any way other than
and they don't.
This is in this world and that is in that world.
No, it is. Anyway, so I binged it like just from and then I rewatched like 2 or 3 episodes. I was like, I gotta watch that again. And the one that like got me was this the Aaron Franklin episodes for Franklin Barbecue out at Austin, Texas. There was 2 episodes shot on that with this thing, and I just rewatched those 2 episodes through it, and how he was describing how he like gets the brisket, he trims all the fat, does all the different things, and then how aerodynamic he's actually shaping the brisket to be so it'll smoke correctly.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Wow.
Oh yeah.
So everything comes over the top, and then all the conversation of left shoulder, right shoulder.
Yeah, so cows naturally kind of lean on the right shoulder or something like that. So as a result, the right brisket, when they get up this way. So the right brisket's a little tougher than the left one. So naturally, you kind of ask for the left briskets. Yeah. Anyways, so been super obsessed with that show. That's the number 1. And then the number 2 is something that I stumbled over on you, Jamie. So I'll read it here. It says, when Jamie isn't working, all right, this is when Jamie isn't working in the virtual world, he can be found on his farm in Bainbridge Island, building furniture, tending sheep, and butchering blue ribbon market hogs.
Oh, yeah. Great.
So you can...
Is that true?
That's true.
You can take the Wyoming, Montana boy out of Wyoming and Montana, but you can't take the Wyoming, Montana out of the boy.
All right. No, that's true.
What the hell, man? This is cool.
Yeah.
So full circle, though.
Full circle.
Back to where it started, though.
Yeah, yeah. So again, I guess that goes back to, I think everybody probably idealizes their childhood, but I grew up with horses and
in no way do I, but that's fine.
He was the guy that loved his high school, right?
Absolutely.
Still does. They don't care for him as much, but
yeah, right. That's probably not true.
It's not.
So having these 2 boys and raising them in the city, I just kept on saying to my wife, like, oh, gosh, we got to get these kids out of the city. And she's from Atlanta. She's a complete city girl. And I like the open space. So I finally kind of wore her down, and we ended up buying a little farm over on Bainbridge Island. And so I get to split my days and my life between, a very kind of tech, futuristic heavy, and then
on 5th and Madison,
right?
And then get to take the ferry across.
I go to the opposite end of the spectrum, and I've got big gardens, and I'm raising hogs and lambs and chickens, and I've been learning the process of slaughtering and butchering. So I'm building right now a kind of a butchery station. I've got a walk-in cooler, and I've got all the tables, and I'm learning how to break down these into the primal cuts and French chops and different things. So that's what we're talking about. My two things. I mean, that's certainly something that's big on. Has been big for me of building out this butchery station, and then also learning the craft of old school butchery.
Wow.
So that's been super satisfying.
And balancing,
and balancing.
I can see kind of a balance effort. I love gardening. I love the farm to table experience. I do as much of that with a lot of I live in Snohomish County, so I interact with a lot of the farmers.
Yeah.
Get a lot of the different cuts and from them, or I'll talk with them about it, like, what do you have, or something like that. So I love it as well. I'm not the farmer.
Right.
I'm the understanding of who that is, and then I'll kind of. But no, this is wildly entertaining. Go ahead. Yeah. This is why I wanted to have the top two for me.
Right. No. So I think that maybe the other two for me, then the second would be I have a 12-year-old who's really into coffee, and I love coffee and I love espresso, and so I've been helping him build a little coffee roasting business. We have a coffee roaster, and we're learning to roast these different beans. Right now, we're hooked on these Ethiopian beans that
they're so great, aren't they?
You know what? I'll just leave the I'm just gonna
log
off.
Out of the room for a second, Brad.
I'm just gonna log off of this conversation and take.
So I've been roasting my own coffee for the last 2 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Just fall asleep here, buddy. Yeah, go ahead, take a nap. So Ethiopian's been one of my favorites that I'll roll with a lot of the time.
Awesome.
Also, from a blending standpoint, it does a really good job.
And what are you blending with?
So it does just different origins. So if it's right now Peruvian and Guatemalan and Ethiopian, those are the three that I've been kind of just messing with lately.
Yeah. Huh.
From like a ratio standpoint. But I've realized when I'm blending it, I actually have to individually roast every single one of them.
Yeah.
I'll brew each one of them, and then I'll through the same brewing method. So it's traditionally I'll do either a stovetop percolator, or it's a French press that I'll kind of do with all steel. I don't do any really paper filters or anything like that, just to make sure that I get the oils and a lot of that stuff that come through. And then mixing each one of them just within various cups of coffee. So I'll do like my own little cupping thing. This is literally like what I'll do just to kind of keep myself entertained. My family does whatever, you know what I mean? And I'll sit there in the kitchen and just kind of do this thing. I'm like, okay, it's a 20% of this, or it's 30% of that, and then I'll put another 50% of Ethiopia inside of it. But blending after it's brewed, you actually get a taste, and then you get various different ones. I thought that I had to actually mix the beans and then grind them together and brew them together.
Right.
No.
Huh. Okay. Well, that's a good tip. So we've been doing the single origin because our blends have not yielded the best results.
They're horribly hard to get.
Yeah.
And I tried that in the beginning, and it was just like, ugh, I ruined it. And now I've got all these beans I got to pick out, or else I got to, and then I literally stumbled upon it after I actually did it. I was like, well, I've got some of this left or some of that left. I'll just brew two, and then we'll just mix them together.
Okay, I'm going to try that.
So blend after you brew to get the final result, and then you can kind of go from there.
Huh.
Anyway,
all right, good tip. No, that's
what roaster do you guys have?
I have a hot pot roaster.
Okay,
you heard of that one?
I have not.
It does 250 grams of beans at a time.
Wow. Okay,
and so you can roast it manually, or you can program in different roasts. So I'm shooting for a full city kind of a roast.
Love full city.
And so Ben, my 12-year-old, we just went through and developed a little logo. We've got the pig roast, the Tumblinwood Farms pig roast. So if you're looking for some pig roast,
so awesome. When I come to the office, I'll bring some beans with me.
Okay, awesome.
And
I love that.
I won't.
Yeah, you won't.
Are you not a coffee drinker?
No, it's horrible. It's
so
gross.
You can't live in the Pacific.
That's what I hear every day of my life.
So that was one of the first
episodes. When I first moved over to the Seattle side from the Spokane side, I was told you need to like coffee or teriyaki, or coffee and teriyaki, because that's on every corner,
right?
And a lot of times they're in the same place. I chose teriyaki. Coffee can go somewhere else.
His response was, "Can I have one?
Can I just like one of those things?
Right.
Can I like one of those things?"
Well, are you sure you've tried coffee?
That's exactly what I told him.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've tried coffee.
So I would bring him in the mornings. I would bring him in the mornings, be like, "Look, this is a Kona brew."
Yeah,
he's doing his best. He's doing his best to try to break the mule.
I am.
I do the same thing. So I'm a whiskey lover, and everybody says I don't like whiskey, and I'm adamant that they don't like.
And we're adamant that you like coffee.
And I'll get there, and I'm sure that there will be the one, because I think every palate And I had a conversation.
Sounds like we got to go to the farm too, and the virtual studio.
Yeah, but I think every palate breaks into something in a certain way. I don't think we're not born to like beer, and we're not born to like whiskey, and we're not born to like coffee. I think you start it when you're young, and you have a bunch of sugar and deliciousness in it.
I don't know.
And then you sort of end up.
I forgot maybe because I just love coffee.
Yeah, because I think you don't. I don't think you really start with this big bitter punch in the mouth.
No, I think you're onto something. When Nicole started drinking coffee, she had to put like 6 lumps of sugar in it.
Yeah,
sure.
To drink it, and now we never put sugar in our coffee anymore. But
right.
No, I think you grow out of it. You start with when you have a beer. You start with garbage piss
taste.
Water beer.
Yeah, right. It's just
and then
Bud Light
now
or
you're
whatever.
into like, I like the hoppy. I like this really bitter
IPA
citrus.
or nice IPA. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So and I think with whiskey you start with something simple, and then now I drink jet fuel basically. So I think it's a palatal thing, and I'll get there.
Right.
It's just funny because he's so into it, and it's so great to see you guys nerd out on that.
For him, it's a temperature thing too.
Also temperature. I don't like hot.
Oh, okay.
So it was because when everybody goes camping, they're like, I just need hot. I don't care if it's coffee or whatever. For me, no bueno on the hot.
Huh.
Not
Interesting.
For me. Es no for me.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Huge
This has been a wildly long and awesome
episode.
Good. It
so
really has.
My favorite of the one we recorded today.
Absolutely.
For sure.
No, absolutely.
Incredible episode. Thank you so much. Can't wait to come and explore this even further because there's so much more to learn. Yeah, man.
Yeah, no, we sincerely appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Is there any place that they actually can reach out to you? Obviously,
Studio216.com.
Yeah.
Any other LinkedIn pages?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I think it's just Jamie Fleming. You'll find me. Look for.
We'll put it up on there. We'll put it. Make sure it's right.
We'll put up some of the links. And hey, guys, make sure you share this with your colleague. Make sure you actually with that frontline worker or with that informational worker that with where your world sits.
Yeah,
such a cool place to actually see that next frontier where we're going. So
also, I've decided that I'm gonna start a Daft Punk cover band.
Okay,
and it's gonna be called Digital Twin.
Digital Twin, I like
Digital Twins. Yeah.
Boom, done.
Well, let's take some of that music and bring us out. So thanks for joining EdifyStudios.com today, the Edify Studios show. Please share this on iTunes. Make sure you actually listen along. And thanks so much for joining us today. We'll catch you next time.
Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Edify Studios podcast with hosts Brad Glauser and Brad Walker. To learn more about Edify Studios, visit www.edify-studios.com. That's www.edify-studios.com.